I'm going to show you my hard-won Claude Code tips, pulled from my own experience building apps like moltenbase.com and tips from the Anthropic and Claude dev community. So not only that, I'm going to show you how to build a full stack CRM using a stack of Next.js, Prisma, NeonDB for our Postgres database, and also the gracious sponsors of this video, and Clerk for authentication. Following this workflow and learning this stack will teach you the basis of how to build your own apps. If you started a vibe-coded project and run into issues when it's got complicated, then this is the video for you. So I just want to take a couple of seconds to congratulate Juan from the Switch Dimension community. Juan completed our web app build course and went on to enter the Bolt Hackathon, and Juan walked away with 10,000 euros for his submission routes. So well done, Juan. If you want to join more people like him, make sure to check out the community. So the outcome here is a full stack web app using Next.js. We have Clerk in order to run our authentication, so you can log in and out and manage all your users. We have Prisma set up to manage the database in the background. Our database is going to be Neon, the sponsor of this video. They're my default go-to anyway. I actually reached out to them in this case to sponsor the video because I was going to be talking about it anyway. Now look at these nice little animations courtesy of 21st Century Dev. I can even move it across columns and see as each one of those animates and moves over and back. So Claude Code is a terminal-based application, but if you're going to be building apps, you want to see the files, you want to see the file system, and you want to be able to save and do other things with extensions like Git. So you're going to need an IDE or a development environment. And in this case, I'm using Cursor because it has other benefits as well. You can use VS Code, Windsurf, whatever you want. So in Cursor, open a new project and then go to Terminal and New Terminal, or hit Command J. You will need Node version 18 or above, so you can just type in Node-V to see what version you have, and if you don't have it, you can just install it pretty simply. Then just type in this command to install Claude Code on your machine. You're going to want the Claude Code for VS Code extension in your IDE. This will work in Cursor, Windsurf, anything like that, so just click on this to install it. So the power of this is it knows exactly what text you've selected. It can help you with diff viewing, seeing what changes have been made by Claude Code, tab awareness so it knows what file you're looking at, and other types of configuration. So there's a couple of ways we can run Claude Code. Just type Claude itself, we'll run it in interactive mode. Lots of people use the Claude dangerously skip permissions flag in order to move as fast as possible, and I use it quite a bit myself and I've never run into any troubles, but I think a better way is to actually add various levels of permissions into your config file, and I'm going to show you that later on. You can type Claude-R to resume a previous conversation. You can pick from a list, or you can type in C just to continue the last conversation that you had running. I see lots of people get tripped up by the current working directory. Make sure this is the directory or folder or project that you want to work on. So Claude is now running in your terminal, and after a while you'll have a few different terminals running. I find it useful just to rename this to Claude so you can find it again easily. Before we set up Claude, give me 1 minute to set up Next.js, our framework for our application, and then we'll get straight back to it. This is your command to install Next.js. I use Next.js for pretty much all my projects. It's just great for setting up websites and web apps, and just learning one framework well just makes it so much easier to move faster with your projects. Go at all the defaults, as you can see here, and it's installed up in the right hand side here. Once installed, just type in npm run dev, and then it'll give you your framework for your app here at localhost 3000. So here we are, ready to go. So I'm just going to name this tab here server. So again, Claude Code is a terminal-based application, or a CLI, and it can be a little bit intimidating, but it really is quite feature-rich. Okay, let's start to learn the commands. So type question mark and you'll get a cheat sheet for your most used commands. The top 3 commands you're going to use all the time are the / command, which basically gives you all the commands at your fingertips. You're going to use the @ symbol to attach any file for context and reference. And hitting Shift and Tab will cycle you through plan mode and auto accept edit mode. I'm going to cover each of these in a second. Okay, so first some housekeeping. We want to make sure that our IDE or cursor is connected to Claude. So if I type in /IDE, and hit return, and we can see here cursor is integrated. If you have an established code base, the first command you want to run is /init. Claude is going to examine your code base and create a claude.md file, which is basically a condensed summary of your application that Claude can use in subsequent calls to understand how your project is set up. Just a reminder of what project we're working on and the important rules around it. So here you'll see Claude is asking for permission. So again, I mentioned you can use dangerously skip permissions if you want to move a lot faster, but I also encourage you just to build up a config file of all the rules that you're happy to run safely. And I'm just going to say yes, and don't ask again for these kind of commands. So you can find these permissions are added in .claude and settings.local, and you'll see this is one of the first permissions that's allowed. So you're going to build these up over time, or you can have denied permissions as well, like deletion maybe. You want to make sure that it can't delete files too easily with asking you for permission. And then you can also save these permissions into your global Claude file so that it's not something you need to do on a project level basis. So remember, in terms of your configuration, you can have rules and settings and commands all at the project level, which you can share then via GitHub with other people on your team, or you can have it at the global level, or both, so that for every project that you open, you have the same set of settings. So the local settings are going to be in .claude here in your local directory. And the global settings for all the Claude instances that you open across all your projects will be in your home folder. You can type in this command here, it'll bring you to your home directory. And then if you type in change directory.claude or cd.claude, you'll be able to find all those files. Now with Claude Code and the IDE plugin, you can play around with where you have Claude showing up. So if I open a page here, and then I can just click on this little icon here based on the plugin, and I can open up Claude Code here. So the other thing is that you can have as many instances of Claude as you like running. So we can actually have multiple agents in multiples of these windows doing things at different times. So when I'm building new features, I like to use plan mode as much as possible. It does take up some tokens and a little bit of time, but it pales in comparison to having an agent run for 15 minutes doing the wrong thing. So having a few minutes to do planning just to see what steps are going to be taken, you can correct the model and then make sure that you're going in the right direction. So Shift Tab will get you into plan mode here. You can see it in green. So you'll notice the integration here between Claude Code and Cursor. It's telling me that I'm in page.tsx currently. So that is the context whenever I have a conversation here with Claude. It will be thinking about this particular page. I can actually select elements of the code. I've got 8 lines selected, and I could then get Claude to explain these lines of code to me. So I find this really helpful if I don't understand what's going on and I want to learn about some particular syntax. So I highly recommend you doing that yourself. So you can highlight the code and then just say, explain this code to me. So make sure you're learning as much as you can as you proceed. So another way to add context is with the @ symbol. So if I just type @ and the first few letters of whatever file, you'll see that it's giving me the context of this page over here and pulling it in. So when I ask my next question of Claude, it's basically going to know that I'm talking about this particular page, or I could actually talk about, say, this whole source folder. Now, because we're in the terminal, we can't just say highlight this here and hit delete. We have to use some clever shortcuts to navigate that really just speed things up. So if I want to move to the start of the line, I could just, of course, use my cursor like this. But if I hit Control A, it brings me to the start of the line. And if I want to delete that, I hit Control K. So I have plan mode on, I've added in the context of our page, and I've said this is the home of our app. It will be called dashboard. Also create a settings page. We're creating a skeleton for our app. It will have a consistent sidebar on the left-hand side for navigation. So a big tip here is to take the time to set up the skeleton of your app. It's like how the components will fit together, how the navigation will work. Oftentimes what I find when people start with vibe coded projects, they jump in and they just start building features, and those features go all over the place and they ended up in this big mess of a folder system. If you spend a little bit of time thinking about how you're going to structure your project, it's going to save you so much effort later on. So the reason I'm asking for a dashboard and a settings page is that this is just a good pattern for a standard web app. So you can see Claude here gives us a plan on how it wants to proceed, and I just check that off to make sure I'm happy, which I am, and then I'm going to say yes and auto accept edits. So Claude will give you a to-do list as it makes its way through all the changes. This is really good for keeping an eye on what's going on. It's going to show you the files that it is changing. Anything that's in green with a plus is being added to a file. Anything in red is being taken away. This is called the diff or difference. So it's finished running those commands and it says, let's run the test server, but I've already got the test server running here. We remember we started it earlier on, so I don't want it to do that. So the next feature I want to show you is Claude memories. So to add a memory, I just hit the hash symbol. So you can see my memory here. Don't ask to run npm dev. It's usually running already. So your memories are going to be stored in your claude.md file. You remember we set that up at the start. So in this case, I'm just going to put it in my project memory. So you can see it's added here in the claude.md file. So it can be confusing trying to figure out the difference between memories, rules, prompts, context, etc. These are all really just marketing terms. It's really just simple to think about them as a system prompt or a basic prompt. What is the little piece of information that you're sending to the model each time you're carrying out a command? So if you think about it that way, you're not going to go too far wrong. So if we go to localhost 3000, you'll see that we have a nice little dashboard here with a settings page. Now let's just take a quick look at what was created there. So one thing I'm missing from Cursor is it had a whole workflow around reviewing files and understanding what changes are being made. It's not as intuitive in Claude because it's a terminal-based application. You're not getting the same experience, but here's how I work around it. So up here, I click on my version control here, which is Git. You can see that we have our initial commit already when we started the project. And here we can see the changes. So if it's marked as U, it means it's an untracked file. So that pretty much means it's new according to Git. And if it's got an M, it means it's modified. So this is a file that's been changed. So if I click on the sidebar component here, I'll be able to see exactly what was created by Claude. So if I'm happy with this file, I can then just click stage change. So I'm accepting that one, and you see it's moved into the staged changes. So that means that basically I've accepted that. So we can look at the rest of the files and we can accept them. Now, if I click on a modified file here, I can see the changes that have been made side by side in a preview. So anything in green has been added by Claude and anything in red has been taken away. So in Cursor, you have this ability to accept or reject changes. Here, what we can do is we can either stage the block or revert the block. So revert means that we're going to revert the change, and stage means that we're happy and we're accepting it, and then it gets accepted in here. So in Cursor, you can create commit messages here by hitting this little button, or you can actually get Claude to go and generate a commit message for you. What I encourage you to do is kind of use this kind of a standard as your first commit. So you might just write this yourself, or whatever way you like to format your commit messages. So once you've done one or two of these commits yourself manually, the AI basically picks up on your format or your standard, and it will kind of copy that as it generates commits for you. It's a little tip. So it's really important to commit your changes every time you've done a round of successful work, because AI will often go rogue, go wrong, or just generally go in the wrong direction. You want to be able to step back in time. So committing as you go is just a no-brainer when it comes to AI. So back to managing your context. Now that we've finished a particular piece of work and we're moving on to something else, there's no harm in clearing your context window to freshen it up. So we type in / and clear. And if you wanted to take some of what you'd been working on already and bring that conversation history forward into the next conversation, you could have actually just typed / and compact, and that will actually compact the last conversation into a summary so that it can bring it forward into the next. I don't use that too much, but I use clear constantly. One of the most useful tools that Claude has access to is web search. So you can get it to use search documentation to make sure that it's setting up new components in the most modern and recent way. But we can also extend Claude Code with MCPs. There's pretty much an MCP now for any different type of tool you can think of out there on the web, and we can use them to give our Claude Code extra powers. And if we type in Claude MCP, we can get a list of options in terms of our MCPs. So you can add MCPs in one by one. What I find easiest is just adding them in via this command from Claude Desktop, where I've got them set up already. So I type in Claude MCP, add from Claude Desktop, and then you can see all the different MCPs that I can add, and I can space and select them and confirm which ones that I want. Ones I find particularly useful are browser MCP. So Claude can actually see the console logs of your browser and take screenshots. And Context 7 has basically gone and indexed all the documentation from all the different frameworks and tools out there so that it can be quickly ingested and understood by the LLM. Brave Search is an upgraded version of the native search, and the Magic MCP from 21st Dev allows you to do some nice styling on your components. If you have any troubles when you're setting up MCPs or you're running commands on Claude, you may need to restart the Claude instance or close this window and restart it again before it can pick up the new changes. So typically, as I decide to build out new features in an established app, the next thing I would recommend is that you create feature branches. So a safe way of working with AI and Claude is to use new branches for your experiments or your new developments. So if I go up here in Cursor or VS Code, I click this button and I go down here to branch. I'm going to hit create branch, and then it's going to prompt me for the name of the branch. So I'm going to call this branch Auth because we're going to set up user control for our application. Now you'll see here over on the left-hand side that in our source control graph here, it's switched to the auth branch. And if I'm in my terminal and if I hit git status, it's going to say we're on branch auth. So we can safely work on this branch, make mistakes, and we can always go back in time to our main branch if everything goes wrong, or if things go right, we can basically merge in our auth branch into the main branch and accept all the changes. So setting up authentication, I like to use Clerk. It's got a generous free tier. So I'm going to say, let's use context 7 to set up Clerk auth to wrap our source application. And I'm in planning mode just because I want to see how it decides to step forward. I'm going to hit return. So it's given us a plan here for setting up Clerk, and I'm pretty happy with all of this. It's important to make sure that the provider, so this is the authentication wrapper, is wrapped around the outside of your application. And that's why I specified it in the prompt. Now it's giving us instructions here to go to the Clerk dashboard, get that set up and get our API keys. So let's do that really quick. I'm just going to create an application and I'm going to call it Claude test, and we're going to create the application. Scroll down here and get your Clerk API keys. So just hit the copy button. So it's telling me that I need to install it in the .env local. So basically we need our API keys in here in order to work. So I paste them into my .env local file and I'm hitting save. And while I'm at it, I'm just going to rename this from .local to .env. Restart your dev server. So hit Control C and then just hit the up key to get your last running command and then hit npm run dev again. It's a really common problem with authentication setup with any kind of a AI coded app, that the wrapping doesn't work in the right way. And this is traditionally because of your component structure and your layouts. So oftentimes you'll see that the sign in appears on the top of the navigation bar. So that happened in this case. And so what I would just say is take a look at the app via the browser MCP in the sidebar, or just take a screenshot. It's not showing that the app is protected by the auth. It's showing the sidebar, and then I'm giving it I gave it the context of the app layout file so it could have a head start on knowing what's going on. So use the browser MCP and did some updating of how the app is structured. The dashboard now is wrapped in its own folder structure. And if we go to view the app after restarting, now we can see that the entire app is protected. So let's go and sign in. And now we have authentication working super fast for our application. And then down here, you have the ability to manage your account and sign out. And if you go back to our Clerk dashboard, we can see that that user has been added and we can manage them from there. So that was a fairly successful piece of development, and we're on the auth branch. So now I'm kind of happy that we can merge the two together. So let's go back to the main branch. We go to checkout to, and then we can see the main branch here. So let's just click on that. So now you can see we've switched over to the main branch, and we click up here again and we can click branch, merge, and we have the option of the auth branch. Let's click on that. And we can see now the two of them have been merged together. And if I go to my app, we're on the main branch and it has the authentication in place. So if you remember, we have all these slash commands here that we can use. So we can create our own reusable slash commands. It's just like cursor rules. We can attach them as we need them, or we can call on them as we see fit. So up here in your .claude folder, just right click and create new folder, and we're going to call it commands. And then in that, we're going to create a new file and we're going to call it design mode. Now I'm going to attach that as a reference. And so I'm giving an instruction here on how to create our first slash command. And you can write these slash commands yourself based on what you need. Here's an example of one I use quite a bit. So now we can use this slash command every time I want to go into design mode. And I use design mode when I'm trying to feel out the front end of an application. The problem with Claude is that it'll often try and connect the back end and do some of the heavy lifting around how it all works. But what I want to do is just get a sense of how the interface or the UI is going to work and connect. And I just want to prototype how it feels. So telling it to only use dummy JSON data in the background. And then when we're happy, we can proceed to connect the database. So when you set up a slash command, it won't be recognized immediately. You're going to have to close and restart Claude Code. So I've got design mode selected, and now I want to give it a reference to a design style that I like. So you could go to Mobbin, Pinterest, Dribble, wherever you like to get your design inspiration. And here's an example of one. I'm just going to screenshot this. So I've got our design mode custom command triggered. I've pasted in the image and I'm giving it this prompt. Let's use this image as inspiration for the color scheme, update the existing pages and theme to match. Create a new branch, call it theme update. Hit return. We've switched to theme update and I'm going to hit return here. Claude took us way too literally in using this as the inspiration. It's text. It's basically taken all the text and references from the image and overwritten what we had there before. That's fine because we didn't have a whole lot, but this is exactly why we use branches and version control, so we can step things back. Now, the design inspiration and the color scheme is a great starting point, but we don't need half of this stuff in here. So we have two different choices. We can revert all the way back, or we could just give it a follow-on prompt to strip it back again. So I've given it a correction here and let's hit return. So that's looking a whole lot better. Now, there can be a lot of hanging around when you're waiting for the model to change, and you don't want to head off and scroll social media. You want to keep yourself in focus. So I'll often run two agents at the same time. So you just click the Claude button there again, and it will open you an agent running side by side. So while I'm working on the front end of my app with one agent, I can work maybe on the back end or something separate with another agent. So I'm going to say, let's set up and install Prisma for this app to work with NeonDB. Use context 7 to ensure up-to-date setup. So Prisma is a way of connecting Next.js to your database. In this case, I'm going to use one of my favorite providers, NeonDB. And the reason I really like to use Prisma is because it's got this schema written and built into the application code. So our model can actually see what the schema is and it can decide to make changes and update it itself, rather than you having to run SQL commands or do things separately. So it means that our model can see everything in one place in our application. So let's go back to one agent for simplicity. So we can close that one and let's keep open our Prisma one here. So basically we have a library file, and the important thing is here we have our schema. So this is basically the basic schema or SQL setup for our new application. And so I'm happy with all that. I'm going to commit this, add Prisma. Perfect. So it's giving me a set of commands that I need to run. First, we need to go and set up NeonDB really quickly. And the one thing I love about NeonDB is how quickly you can just get it up and running. So the cool thing about NeonDB is that it's serverless. So if you're using other database providers, they're typically running on some kind of EC2 instance or some kind of compute. So that basically means that when you start it up, you're paying for it all the time, and that's going to cost the company money, and they're only going to run it for a certain amount of time before they pause it or switch it off. With serverless Postgres, you can basically have it spin up whenever the app needs to use it, and then it spins back down again really quickly. For this reason, Neon can give us up to 10 databases for free that we can run for our projects without incurring any costs. And if you're building agents and MCPs, Neon is really set up for that as well. And you can even use it as a vector database via pgvector. So super simple. You just need to log in, click on new project, give it a name. So then I'm just going to click connect, click on env here to get our env details. We're going to copy this, and then we're going to paste that string into our .env file. So again, our env file being our environment variables. So Black and Claude, I'm just saying, hey, I've set up Neon and I've updated the env file. So very quickly what's happened there is we've set up Prisma to connect with Neon, and then Prisma goes and generates a user table, which basically migrates that then to Neon. So if we go straight over to Neon, so the menu here on the left, just click on tables, just hidden by my head there. And then you'll see that we have the user table has been set up, and that you can see the Prisma migrations history as well. So we've got a clean connection. So now that we've got the skeleton for our application in place, we have authentication so we can bring in users and we can guard our app. And we also have a database set up where we can start to store all of our information for each user. We're going to create the first set of features for our application. So I'm going to say something simple here, like let's add a Kanban feature to the app, create a new page in the sidebar for this, and set up the relevant tables in the database. And I'm in plan mode again because I want to see what it comes up with here. So again, it's given me a plan here, and it's important to pay attention to the data access patterns here. So it's going to use API routes in this case instead of server actions, and I'm okay with that in this case. So I'm going to say yes, fire away. It took a little while to get here. We had to set up our skeleton, we set up Prisma, we set up Auth, but when all those are in place, things start to move a whole lot smoother. So you'll see now with all our infrastructure in place, in one prompt, we managed to get our Kanban feature up and running. And if you just cycle through all the code that was generated here, and then we take a look over at our app. Okay, so we get ourselves a nice dashboard and a Kanban setup with lazy loading, and I can go and add a new deal, add in all the details, select from the different columns, add the deal in, and I can even drag and drop them across all the different columns. We can sign up new users, log in and log out via Clerk. And we've got a full database set up using Neon via Prisma. One last thing before we finish up, I'd like to add a little bit of polish to our UI. So I'm going to use the 21st Century Dev MCP to do that. So I'm going to reference our dashboard again, and I'm just going to hit return. Now look at these nice little animations courtesy of 21st Century Dev. And then I can even look at this. I can even move it across columns and see as each one of those animates and moves over and back.
Your agent has finished.
Okay, so what you heard there was a little prompt that I've set up. So whenever the agent is finished, it lets me know. Because one of the big problems you have is, you know, you're waiting for one particular agent to work and you go and you get distracted and you do something else. You lose a lot of time by not being focused on what you're doing. That's why I like to maybe run 2 agents or work on something in the same context at the same time, and then have that little notification pull me back in again. So I'm going to show you how to set that up as well. So hooks are our way of listening to different things that Claude is doing and then performing some kind of an action or triggering that action. So once Claude has created a section of work, we could create a hook to go and have Claude review the code to run a prettier, or we could have a hook in place that works right before any kind of destructive tool like remove or sudo is run, just in case we're going to drop tables from a database or delete something. We want to get approval on that for sure. So we could put a hook in there. We can have something happen right before a tool is used, after it's used, when a notification is sent, when a session starts, or let's say right about when Claude concludes the response. So in that case, I like to get a notification that Claude is finished working, an audio notification, so that I can switch back to help it keep moving. So we can set up a hook in order to do that. So as I mentioned, the most useful hook I've found so far is just that simple audio feedback whenever Claude is finished. So there's a really handy repository here you can use from Pascal Peretta. It's called Awesome Claude Code, and you can just run this command here and it will install this globally, which will work on your Mac or Windows machine. So basically, whenever it's finished running a particular script, you're going to hear
your agent has finished.
And the last and most recent thing we're going to cover is the idea of sub-agents or your custom sub-agents. So if I type in /agents and hit return, we're given this helper to go and create your own agents. So I'm just going to click create new agent. Again, you can add this locally to your project, or you can set it up on your machine so it's available to every instance of Claude Code that you run. And we're going to generate it with Claude. And so basically we just want to give a description of what we wanted to do. So I've given it a prompt here: expert React and Next.js senior engineer reviews code for production readiness. You could put in a security engineer, you could have a design agent, you can come up with any conceivable type of agent you can think of. You can have a therapy agent, a CBT agent, a business analyst, a product manager. So we have our sub agent here: expert React and Next.js senior engineer reviews code for production. You could also put in a test engineer here as well. So I'm just going to go and hit return, and this generates its own agent. I'm going to go with blue, and then we can just hit enter to save. And then if I go up here now to the left hand side, and if I go to agents, we have our React Next.js production engineer, and we've got a full description and breakdown of how it works. And you can edit that as well if you want. So the way you want to think about custom agents and even sub agents is in their naming. They are sub agents. you don't want to think about necessarily calling them yourself all the time. Where you get really efficient is where you're using the main Claude agent to call them for you. And if you write a really good description here, it should know when to call upon them. So let's say you want to prompt it whenever you've written a particular piece of code or worked on a particular problem. What you can also do is also set up hooks as well, so that when a large piece of code is completed, you could have the sub-agent called so that it will review the code or write tests or whatever else you wanted to do. Maybe you need to want to run a series of checks before it gets pushed to GitHub. So everyone has their favorite tool or hook or use case. I'd love to know how you're using Claude Code in the comments. That way I can learn more as well as the rest of the community.
Your agent has finished.